Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Rachel and welcome to my May wrap-up. So today I am going to be talking about the 9 books that I read in the month of May and what I thought of them. May ended up being a pretty good reading month for me. I did fall into a little bit of a slump towards the middle of the month, but I feel like I am officially out of it now. I was still able to read a good amount of books though, and I'm excited to share my thoughts with you all. So let's get straight into it. These are the 9 books I read in May and what I thought of them. Alright, so I started the month of May off very strong with Heartless Hunter. This is a YA fantasy romance, and it is an enemies to lovers romance between a witch and a witch hunter, which is just such a wonderful setup for a fantasy romance, and I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. This book had absolutely excellent pacing. I felt like I could not put it down. I just wanted to keep turning the page to see what would happen. I also really enjoyed our 2 main characters, Gideon and Rune. They were very fun, and the dance that they kind of did between being enemies, trying to be friends, trying to figure each other out, I thought was super well done as well. And then the ending of this book I thought was fantastic. There were a couple things that absolutely blew me away, and I cannot wait for the second book. I believe this is just going to be a duology, so I'll be very curious to see how everything is wrapped up, but I just love the way that this book ended and how we have left things. It's definitely going to be really fun to see how our 2 characters navigate things in book 2. But I'm really glad that I read this. I had heard a ton of hype about it. I had it recommended to me by a number of you, and you guys were absolutely right. This book is very, very good. The next book that I read in May was Trial of the Sun Queen by Nisha J. Tooley. This is a new adult fantasy romance, and it is described as The Bachelor meets The Hunger Games, and I think that is very, very accurate. Our female main character ends up getting selected to partake in these trials in order to win the role of queen and wife to the Sun King. Our female main character is a total fish out of water. She is up against, I think, like 12 other women who have been preparing for this their whole life, but for a mysterious reason, she has been selected and forced to participate in the trials and just tries to survive and hopefully gain some notability to help her friends and family. This book ended up just being okay for me. This is a 3-star book. I think my biggest issue was I did feel that the characters felt a little bit young for me. I think it is new adult, but at times I felt that the dialogue felt very juvenile, kind of like teenage age, and I just didn't really connect to the characters as much as I had hoped to. I think it was like a perfectly fine book, but just not a book that I was obsessed with. The next book that I read in May was Thief of Silver and Souls by Eva Chase. So this is a reverse harem, kind of like paranormal gothic romance. Our main character gets hired by a ghost to investigate some mysterious goings on at a nearby university, and she ends up having to begrudgingly team up with 4 men who were working on the investigation prior. She ends up having a romance with all of them, and as she is investigating the university, a lot of things come to light, and she gets a lot more than she bargained for. This is another book that was just like good. I enjoyed myself, but it wasn't a favorite. I think one of my biggest issues with this book is I felt that the romance was not as fleshed out as I had hoped it to be. There were 2 guys that we focused on a lot more, and the other 2 guys were kind of just in the background. This is a series, so there's definitely an argument to be made that in future books, those romances are going to be focused in more, but I just didn't really connect very much with the romances in general, and I just wanted to see more connection, more development, and I felt like that was a bit lacking in this book. I also think after trying a few, I might just not be a reverse harem person, so that could definitely add to it as well, but I feel like the overall vibe of this book is very fun. I really like the university setting, the investigations, and our female main character's origin story was very interesting, but as a romance, this just didn't really work for me. The next book that I read in the month of May was a reread, and that is The Crown of Oaths and Curses by J. Bree. So I reread this book in anticipation for the sequel, The Throne of Honor and Blood, which came out towards the end of May. I do just want to say I'm currently reading that right now. You guys will be seeing that in a vlog very soon. I had hoped to finish it before the month was up, but it just didn't end up happening. But I reread this book just so I could be as fresh as possible for the sequel, and I am so glad that I did. I absolutely love this book. I had such a great time with it. I gave it a 4-star the first time I read it, and I gave it a 4.5 star this time around. It's very close to a 5-star, but I do think just because there are some slow parts in the beginning and it does take some time to get started, that is why it's not like a perfect 5-star to me. But I love these characters so much. They are 5 stars. I absolutely love Rook. She is one of my favorite female main characters in any fantasy romance. She is a witch, and then her fated mate is a high fae. They absolutely hate each other, but they find out that they are fated to be together and try to navigate that as a war goes on. I ended up annotating, which was super fun, and I just felt like I got to know the characters so much more. Not only Rook and our male main character Soren, but all the side characters, Tauron and Titan and Rowan and Airly. I just really love them. I think that they are so dynamic, and I'm really happy that I reread this. The next book I read in the month of May was Fate and Furies by Helen Shorer. So this is the 3rd book in the Legends of Thesmar series, which is an enemies to lovers fantasy romance, and I had a great time with this book. This is another 4-star from the series. The first book in the series I enjoyed enjoyed, but as the series has gone on, I just think the books have gotten better and better. I felt that the dynamic between our two main characters, Wilder and Thea, was really interesting and really fun in this book, and I also enjoyed that a lot of the characters in the series as a whole all come together and are kind of all on the same page in regards to the plot of this book. So that was really fun to see. I feel like we saw a lot of things come to fruition in this book, and we're building towards a really fantastic finale, which is going to be coming out on June 20th. I cannot wait for that book, especially the way that this book ended. Oh my god, I am obsessed with the ending of Fate and Furies, you guys. It was so incredible, and I think that the finale is going to be so epic. I have such high hopes, and I really feel like after reading that final book, this is going to be one of my all-time favorite fantasy romance series. It is so much fun, and the romance is done really well, particularly in this book. I just felt like the banter was just top tier. Helen Shorter is so gifted at dialogue, at banter. She just always brings the tension, which makes the series so much fun. The next book that I read in the month of May was The Deer and the Dragon by Piper CJ. So this book follows our main character Marlo, who is actually a fantasy romance author. Marlo has the ability to see and speak to different kind of ghostly entities. She's had this throughout her whole life, and she has developed a bond and a relationship with one of these entities. She calls him Caliban. They actually end up developing a romantic relationship, but when a conflict occurs between them, she ends up banishing him, unbeknownst to her, forever. One day, she is visited by a fae who ends up telling her that Caliban is missing and he is actually the Prince of Hell. So Marlo ends up teaming up with this fae to go and search for Caliban. She goes through all these different realms, learns a lot more about them, and then learns her role in Caliban's life and her connection to these realms. Unfortunately, I gave this book 2 stars. I really did not end up liking this book, and there are a number of reasons for that. The first one being the characterization. Our main character Marlo is very unlikable in my opinion, and I definitely love an unlikable character. I think depending on how they're written, what purpose does their unlikability serve, and how does that play into the plot, and you know, it's gonna be different person to person. But for me, Marlo, she just didn't seem like a good friend. I didn't really root for her. I just never really connected with her. There's also another character in this book, the fae that Marlo teams up with. Her name is like Flora or Fauna or something like that, and she is just like the definition of a manic pixie dream girl, and I just found her very irritating and grating. That's gonna be a more personal one for me. I just didn't enjoy her, and I think spending so much time with Marlo and this character just wasn't a very enjoyable experience for me. I also feel that the romance was not very well developed. First of all, our character Caliban, obviously he is missing, so he doesn't spend a big portion of time in this book, but when our characters are on page together, I just don't feel the level of attraction and desire and love for one another that we are being told that they have. I don't feel that passion, and so it just makes the stakes feel very low because Caliban just isn't a character that I feel like we get enough time to be invested into and understand Marlo's feelings for him as well as we could, and so the romance just doesn't really do a whole lot for me. I also feel like the plot was very chaotic. There is definitely that central plot line of Marlo searching for Caliban, but there was a lot of other things going on, and I did at times find it hard to kind of organize in my mind what was going on. And then there were a couple things that left a bad taste in my mouth about this book. The first one being jokes made at the expense of a non-binary character. So there is a non-binary character in this book named Kirby. They are friends with Marlo, and Marlo just makes a few jokes about them that are inappropriate at best, and I genuinely don't understand why they were even added. I don't think they bolster this friendship between Marlo and Kirby in any way, and that just overall added to Marlo's general likability, and it just did not make me feel good to have this side character who is non-binary just kind of be made fun of, and particularly jokes that were pointed at their gender identity and their name. I am not non-binary, so I cannot speak to that fully, but I was uncomfortable reading those scenes, and I just don't understand why those jokes were even added in, why that dialogue was there. It did not shed Marlo in a good light, in my opinion. Another thing that left a bad taste in my mouth was I don't even want to call them spicy scenes, the scenes where our two characters are intimate. So I don't want to get too spoilery, but the intimate scene between our characters definitely does not feel fully consensual. Arguably, I definitely think it's living in the realm of dubcon to non-con, and there is also this like underlying plot line for why this scene is happening that just feels very icky, and dubcon and non-con absolutely have their place in like the dark romance subgenre. I think as long as a book advertises as such, there is absolutely no problem with that. But that is not what is presented here, and just the fact that it was this kind of build-up between these characters trying to develop the romance, and then this is the scene that we get between them, just made me very uncomfortable. I hope that I'm explaining myself well. Once again, this is something that if you haven't read the book, you might not exactly know what I mean, but I just really didn't like the way that that was done. It did not feel romantic at all. I actually found the scene kind of hard to listen to, and I was very happy when it was over. So clearly you guys can tell that I did not like this book, but there was one positive about this book that I did want to talk about, and that is there is a theme of religious trauma discussed in this book. Our main character Marlo was religious growing up, she had some negative things happen to her, and she is now no longer religious. She reflects on that and talks about religious trauma and just what that has done to her, how it has shaped her, and I think that that was done well. I think that it was well communicated. I feel like the author is well researched in that topic, and that is a topic that I find very interesting, so that is something that I will say positive about this book. I gave this book 2 stars, but I definitely contemplated giving it 1 star. Maybe that extra star is for the discussion on religious trauma, but overall, I just don't recommend this book, you guys. I walked away from it not feeling super great about it, and the longer I sit with it, just the more upset I'm getting about it. So we are going to move on now. All right, the next book that I read in the month of May was definitely a hit, definitely one of my favorite reads of the month, and that was Lady of Embers by Melissa K. Rorick. This is the 4th book in the Lady of Darkness series, which is a fantasy romance series that features fae, vampires, witches, shifters, a really dynamic cast, really wonderful plot and world building. It's a series I've really fallen more and more in love with each book, and Lady of Embers was absolutely no exception. I loved this book so much for a multitude of reasons, but the main one being that we had the development of a new romance in this book. As I said, there's a bunch of characters, and while we do have kind of our 2 main characters, a lot of the other characters in this book do get their own POVs, they get their own storylines, they get their own problems and achievements, and it just makes the story so fun. And this romance that developed just makes me so happy. I did not see it coming early on in the series, but I think that that made it just so much more exciting. These are 2 characters that I absolutely love and adore, and just seeing them like very slowly fall for each other was wonderful. I'm not going to say who the characters are, I don't want to spoil it, but if you know, you know. They are just wonderful together, and I cannot wait to see more of them in the next book. Overall, this was a 4.5 star book for me, so this is my highest rated book in the series, and this month in June, I'm going to be reading the finale, which is Lady of Starfire. I am so excited. It's also very bittersweet though, because I've really fallen in love with this series, but I'm very excited to see how Melissa K. Rorick ends everything. The next book that I read in the month of May was House of Bane and Blood by Alexis L. Maynard. So this is a Peaky Blinders marriage of convenience fantasy romance, and definitely those elements were very intriguing to me. The steampunk aesthetic and the marriage of convenience are 2 things I was really excited about. This is another book that didn't really end up working for me. I think that I struggled to connect with the characters and thus struggled to connect with the romance. Wasn't super invested in them. I liked them, but they just didn't really do a lot for me. And I also felt like for the first half of the book, not a lot happened. There wasn't a lot of progression in plot. There wasn't a ton of progression with our characters. And so I found myself feeling very bored while reading this. The ending things definitely did pick up, but overall, I just wasn't intrigued enough or invested enough in the characters to really care by that point. So I gave this book 2 stars. All right, and then the final book that I read in the month of May was The Everqueen by L.J. Andrews. So this is the sequel to The Ever King, which is a book that I absolutely love. It is Pirates of the Caribbean meets fae fantasy romance, and this is the follow-up. So while this series is ongoing, The Ever King and The Ever Queen follow our 2 main characters, and this book completes their story. So the next book, which is The Mist Thief, which I am super excited for, is going to follow different characters set in the same world. Unfortunately, The Ever Queen was a bit of a disappointment for me. I was completely shocked because I absolutely loved The Ever King. It was almost a 5 star for me. It was like a really, really high 4 star, but this book felt like a letdown. After reading this book, I feel like I just wish that The Ever King was longer and it was just a standalone, because I think that the plot of that book was so well done and so good and so well executed. The enemies to lovers arc was really great. The, kidnapping scene was really dynamic, and our characters had very clear plot lines, very clear motivations, and the romance just got me so excited. But in this book, I just did not feel as excited about the romance or the plot line. There was a central plot line in this book, but there were also a lot of other things thrown in that for me just kind of muddied a lot of things. I just didn't feel as excited by this or the characters, and I felt my investment in Eric and Livia going way down, which is crazy because I love The Ever King and I still do. But this book, I don't know, it just felt like a disappointing follow-up. I am, as I said, very excited for The Mist Thief. I like L.J. Andrews' writing style and I want to see what else the series has to offer. This follow-up just did not live up to the greatness of the first book, and I found myself pretty bored reading this. All right, friends, so that is it. Those are the 9 books that I read in the month of May. I guess I kind of didn't have like the greatest reading month. Now that I've gone through all of these and actually talked about them, I realized I had quite a few 2 stars, a couple of 3 stars. Then I did have some really great successes with like Lady of Embers and Heartless Hunter, things like that. But yeah, let's hope June is going to be a better month for me. Please let me know what was the best book that you read in the month of May. Also, if you made it to this point in the video and you wanted to let me know, go ahead and leave the cat emoji, because the day that I'm filming this, it is my cat Ivy's 7th birthday. I cannot talk about it. I cannot believe she is 7. Just go ahead and show her a little love with the little cat emoji down in the comments. Please make sure that you're following me on Instagram and Goodreads. They're always linked down below. I really appreciate that you watched this video. I hope that you're having a fantastic day. I love you all so much, and I will catch you guys in the next one.